The reviews are in, and we're going to tell you what they are. He's Todd Vandenberg, I'm Rob Steele, and it's time to bring to an end that thing I brought up on Sunday. It wasn't Sunday, it was Monday. I'm so confused. It's the end of the semester. Not that I'm in school, but my kids aren't. It's confusing me because I have to help them with their homework. And honestly, I've forgotten more about algebra than I ever thought possible. Not that I took much of it in the first place. Meanwhile, back at the movies, we got another 3 to talk about. Todd, we're going to start with you. And no, we're not talking about Mowgli. We're saving that for the end of the show. Ha 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 ha. I guess. Anyway,
Indeed.
We'll start with Hotel Artemis, which I'm not at all familiar with.
Hotel Artemis, a movie that came out and kind of disappeared rather quickly. I'm sure the producers and studio is not happy about that because obviously they want to make money. That's unfortunate because it's a pretty darn good movie. I'm sure what they're hoping for was to tie into the John Wick happiness mania because it's kind of similar to that concept. Not in structure, but basically the premise is this is a hospital for criminals. Sort of like John Wick, a lot of it happened in a hotel for criminals. This is a hospital for criminals. A hospital for criminals which has similar rules. No guns, no killing each other, etc., etc. Jodie Foster is the nurse who runs this hospital. She has a tragic backstory which unfolds before you as the movie goes on. Premises: a few people come in because they come in because they're criminals and they get shot. She's trying to help these people get through it. Other criminals come in. They have issues with each other. Fights ensue. I mean, that's a very simplified version, but I don't want to spoil too much of the plot. The fun is the plot itself is really interesting. Jodie Foster is excellent, like she usually is. It's interesting because she went with just allowing herself to look a little bedraggled because that fits the character. She takes these little tiny mincing steps because she's just weary from being beaten down from life because that's her character. But she's got this inner strength, which is not surprising because Jodie Foster holds that off. But on the surface, she's very meek and calm. And no, she doesn't get into badass gun battles or anything like that. She plays the character as, this nurse who's just there to try to help people. Dave Bautista is her assistant, and you almost think henchman. I mean, he's an orderly. But he is so good in this, and we talked about this briefly before we even started the show, Rob and I, and it's really nice to see this guy get roles that it's more than just the muscle. Because it's an interesting character. There's not a ton of depth to it, but it's an interesting character, and he plays it really well. This is a fun, bloody, though, but very fun movie. Has a surprising, it's not really surprising because there he is on the scroll for the film, which is unfortunate because it would have been more fun. I'm not going to ruin it for you. If you don't see the clip, then you'll be happily surprised when this character shows up towards the end. He's like the big bad, and and I didn't realize he was in it, so it was a nice surprise when he showed up. Lots of good actors, lots of good acting, good action. It's definitely worth a watch. Hotel Artemis. And again, this is something that I really wish I'd seen at the theaters because very fun film. Enjoy the bloodshed.
That sounds similar to what I saw this week, which is still in theaters, but you know what? It'll be, let's see, I think it's coming out Tuesday on DVD. Or streaming. I've forgotten which, but it's coming a lot quicker than I had expected it to, because it doesn't seem like that long ago when Venom came out. But it's I guess the first of what is going to end up being Sony's run at the Marvel Universe, because Venom is a spin-off of Spider-Man. Not that Spider-Man's in the movie, because that would have made sense and immediately was a strike against it in my mind. So basically, the origin of this character, Venom, differs completely from the books, which you can look up yourself, because honestly, we could do an entire show on that, It is an extraordinarily long origin story that covers like 10 years worth of books. It's ridiculous. Short versioning of it for this movie, though, this universe's evil version of Elon Musk sent out a space probe that brought back several symbiotes, which are these globby things that join with humans. One of them escaped and crashed the spaceship and then just left. That would be the symbiote called Riot, who eventually fuses with Carlton Drake, who is the aforementioned Elon Musk type. But then there's our hero, Eddie Brock. He's a reporter who knows that Drake is a bad guy, but gets on Drake's bad side, which costs him his job, his fiancée, his apartment, which is weirdly one of those Full House from the TV show Full House apartments in San Francisco. And it loses him his cat, Mr. Belvedere. Now, see, for me, irony was involved in this since Marvel is owned by Disney, which owns ABC, but this movie is owned by Sony, so the movie will ultimately be on Fox. Meanwhile, back at the movie, with the help of one of Drake's assistants, Brock breaks into Drake's Life Foundation, where he finds one of his friends who is infested with a symbiote. But because, that's what Drake is doing, is fusing people with the symbiotes because that's the future of the human race. But then that friend attacks Eddie, and the symbiote changes from his friend into Eddie, who becomes Venom because that's the name of the symbiote, and mayhem ensues from there. Now, I did this explanation in about a minute, and yet what I just described takes about the first half of the movie. Now, thankfully, it doesn't really seem like that. It doesn't seem like it's that long. It's fast-paced until you look at your watch and then you go, we haven't done anything yet, and it's 45 minutes in. So it's fast-paced, but it doesn't go anywhere. So it's spinning its wheels and causing a lot of smoke. It's a smoke screen. Now, there's a lot of good action scenes in this movie. Even the crashing the spaceship thing was nice. But that's where the good stuff ends for me. The CG in this movie, of which there is a lot, is spotty. In some scenes it's great, but most of them, it reminded me of another movie that seemed to have a very similar plot line and is, probably on purpose, another creation of Venom co-creator Todd McFarlane. That would be the Spawn movie that came out in '97. And a lot of the CG in the fight scenes reminded me of the 1997 movie. Now, it's not horrible. It's kind of a fun movie, and by that I mean both of them. But they have a few fatal flaws in my mind. First of which, like I said, the CG is lacking a lot. Number two, the bad guy, Carlton Drake, or Riot, whichever one you want to call him by, is lacking in bad guyness. He's suffering from Marvel villain is what he's happening. I know he's the bad guy, but he's not a bad guy. He seems more like a lackey than a villain. It's kind of like having a Batman movie where the villain isn't the Penguin, but it's one of his henchmen. You kind of go, really?
Yeah.
That doesn't work. Number three, once I realized the parallels to the Spawn movie, I couldn't stop seeing it as the Spawn movie. I'm not sure if that's really a bad thing or a good thing, but, there it is. Number four, there's only 5 of these, don't panic. The music in this movie is very uneven. Each character, no matter how minor, seems to have their own theme. Now, some of the themes are symphonic, some of them are rock music, some of it is blues. But when they're all involved in a chase scene and they try to cut back and forth between the characters, the music goes with it and it doesn't work. It's very jarring, and it, explains to me why John Coltrane, John Williams, and Johnny Rotten never teamed up for an album. It's that bad in my head, okay? And the fifth, and I think the main problem I have with this movie, is that it's not in the Marvel Cinematic Universe where it needs to be. They could have, I mean, the MCU, Disney has the money to have done the Secret Wars and the origin story correctly, and it would have been so much better. But Sony, who has the rights to it, is impatient, and it didn't happen. And now that opportunity is completely blown. But it does have a spectacular Stan Lee cameo at the end. So, is the movie worth seeing? As a rental? Sure. Or you can wait until it comes to one of the inevitable Fox movie channels. Fine. But in the theater, I mean, you can, but you probably did skip it. So, make of Venom what you wish.
Ooh, lovely.
Yeah.
Lovely played. How well played that was.
Thank you.
I had kind of a similar experience with the movie I'm going to talk about now, and we touched on this briefly Sunday.
Mixed reviews?
Mixed reviews. The latest version of the story of Mowgli, the Jungle Book. This had some interesting background. It took quite a while for this to get made. Andy Serkis is the director. This is actually it's the first film he started working on directing, but it's the second film to be released because that's how long it took to make Mowgli. Originally, this was going to be released to theaters. It's on Netflix. So you can kind of make of that what you will, is that the studios thought, yeah, we don't want a disaster, so let's just sell this to Netflix and see what happens.
I think I'll put this over here.
Yeah, and Netflix has had some great movies, definitely. So it's not necessarily the kiss of death as, it's on Netflix, it must suck. It's like, not at all. Not the case at all. In this case,
Bright was so good.
Yeah, Bright was not one of those. This is not Bright, but it's not exactly Beast of the Southern Wild either. It is somewhere in between. We were talking a little bit about how mixed reviews on Rotten Tomatoes doesn't necessarily mean that people are kind of ambivalent about it. Some critics like it and some don't. And now it's been updated. 54% of the critics viewed this positively. 46% no. Very briefly, I also saw Gotti, which is a really bad movie. It's got a 0 on Rotten Tomatoes. That doesn't mean every critic hated it. It means that no critic recommends it, which is a world of difference from saying it's the worst film. It's not that every critic gave it a 0. It's just that no critic said, go see this movie. And if you see it, you can see why. Because it sucks, but it's far from the worst thing I've ever seen. Back to Mowgli. The story is well told. Definitely, it's an interesting story. Obviously, we know that. It is a darker spin on Mowgli. There are no songs, which, for those of you who are fans of the original Jungle Book, you're going to be sad. No songs. There's no King Louie, which is interesting. But I think King Louie was probably a Disney creation anyway. There is the scene in the Monkey Kingdom, the giant cave, but King Louie is not their king. Someone else is ruling them. That's someone else being Shere Khan. The voice acting, because again, this is not a live action version. It's not live action when it's computer generated. Benedict Cumberbatch does Shere Khan wonderfully. Absolutely. Most of the voice acting is very, very good. The problem that comes up and this is the same problem I had with Disney's version of the Jungle Book that just came out a couple of years ago. The computer generated animals, they're trying too hard to make them kind of anamorphic, kind of like you can relate to them as people instead of just making them straight animals. And it's even worse in this because all of the major characters were motion captured because that's Andy Serkis's thing. Why he thought, or anyone thought, it's a good idea to put mocap sensors all over Benedict Cumberbatch's face so that the tiger has the expressions of Cumberbatch while he's reading his lines. Tigers' faces don't work the same way as people's faces. They're not built the same way. Bears aren't built the same way. Panthers aren't built the same way. Wolves aren't built the same way. It was an incredibly stupid choice. And it really hurts this movie. Because the tiger's face doesn't look like a tiger. It doesn't look like a person either. It looks like a tiger with like maybe 10, 20% human in there, which is just, it's ugly. And it sucks. And it reminds you, wow, this is a movie. Instead of being able to just get into it. And it's the same thing with every one of these characters. It was just, this is one of the reasons that the movie was delayed for so long, because they spent so much time and effort working on the effect that is the worst part of the film. It was a terrible freaking decision because the tiger doesn't look like a damn tiger. How can you be afraid of it when it looks like whatever atrocity this freaking thing is? And the wolves are freaking awful. They don't, their heads don't even look like wolf heads. I mean, it's just, and it's sad because the acting is good. The kid who plays Mowgli is very good. It's definitely an interesting story. I like the take on getting a little more realistic because again, it's not the happy, silly Jungle Book movie. It's more back to the original story. And colonialism is tied in with it, and the man invading the jungle and upsetting the balance. But Kate Blanchett narrates, basically, she's Ka, the giant python. But when you look at the damn python, it's like, what the hell is that supposed to be? It's just, it is a mixed review, definitely, because this movie could have been excellent if they had just done animation and not tried to do the mocap, because it's freaking awful. And it is sad because Serkis, I think, probably can be a very good director. Actually, last night, he's done another movie, the movie that he worked on between Mowgli, which actually came out last year, is called Breathe, is a very good film. And it's about a gentleman who came down with polio when he was 28, and his lifelong battle for dignity and mobility and living life despite the fact that he was paralyzed from the neck down. Really, really good movie. Andrew Garfield stars. Claire Foy is in it as his wife. Really good movie. If you're going to want to watch one of the two movies that Andy Serkis has directed, watch Breathe. Made $500,000 in theatrical release. It's a much better movie than Mowgli, which is getting huge amounts of press. Catch Mowgli at some point, because if you got Netflix, it's free. And, the kids might like it, but to me, Mowgli is just a disappointment because it could have been so much better. And he got so caught up with doing the technology that just didn't fit. I mean, it works with Planet of the Apes, because at least chimps have faces that are similar to humans. Gollum.
It worked with Gollum.
Similar to a human. But, the faces aren't the same. You're not going to show expression. Tigers can't show expressions like people do. Their faces aren't built the same way. It was an incredible waste of time, which is really jarring, which is sad, because if you can overlook that, or if it doesn't affect you the way it did me, hopefully it doesn't, you'll enjoy the movie. But that just knocked it right out of the realm of being able to just connect to the movie, unfortunately.
Let me ask you two questions.
Yes.
First, would it actually work if you just watched it with your eyes closed?
Oh, definitely.
See, mixed reviews. Just take one of the senses away. So if you happen to be, sight impaired.
Yeah.
And two, and this occurred to me when I heard that Benedict Cumberbatch was doing this, because when they, he was Smaug.
Smaug, exactly.
In The Hobbit, and that worked because they didn't try to make it look like Benedict Cumberbatch.
Right.
There was some mocaption involved, but it was done differently. Have you seen the Benedict Cumberbatch is an otter stuff?
I have seen that. It would work if it was an otter. If Shere Khan was an otter, it would have worked beautifully.
There we go, then.
Because he does look like an otter.
Maybe that's what they were thinking.
But it's odd because the tiger literally does not look. It looks like a tiger except when you see its face, and that's not how tigers' heads look. And the bear, more or less, Baloo looks. Andy Serkis basically also plays Baloo, which Baloo is not a fun, happy. None of the characters are fun and happy in this movie because that's not what the movie is about, which is fine. That's the whole point of the movie. But yeah, it's better if you watch it with your eyes closed. To me, Shere Khan was, well, the wolves were pretty awful too. I will say there's a terrific moment in the movie, though, and it's about an hour and 20 minutes into the movie where Mowgli has gone to the world of man, and that's not a spoiler because that's what happens. Okay, get over it.
You've probably seen the story before.
Yeah, and he's although this part's not in the Disney things, but I mean this is part of the story. So he's talking with the hunter and talking about, just having discussions with the hunter, and an incident happens which jars Mowgli into the realization of what man's world is really like. I'll just say that. So if you're going to watch the movie, that is a great moment, and it's unfortunate that the movie didn't have more of those moments, because that's extremely well done. Which, again, Serkis, I think, will have a really good future as a director, because that was just great. And frankly, Breathe is a better movie because you don't have to do mocap with Andrew Garfield to make him look like Andrew Garfield.
How convenient.
Yeah, if he gets away from his fascination with that toy, I think he'll be just fine.
So we'll end on a good note then.
Indeed.
And come back Sunday when we'll have more movie news. It's Monday. I keep forgetting that. We're on Mondays now. Oy. Come back Monday. After you've had a nice, relaxing weekend when you've gotten out and gone to see a movie.
That's pretty much it. Pretty much it. Pretty much it.